In a quiet courtroom nestled in a suburban county, a case, unlike any other, was about to unfold, one that would not only shake the lives of those involved, but also send ripples through the legal community and the entire country. This was not just a story about a failing marriage. It was about betrayal, silence, and a fight for justice that would ultimately lead to change in the very laws that once failed to protect. Before we dive into this emotionally charged journey, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more powerful, real-life legal stories that keep you on the edge of your seat. Your support helps us bring these stories to light every single day. Now, back to the courtroom. Julia and Marcus had been married for nearly 2 decades. To everyone on the outside, their life seemed perfect. 2 successful professionals, a beautiful home, and a teenage daughter named Lily, who was the center of their world. But what no one saw were the cracks forming beneath the surface. Cracks filled with control, manipulation, and silence. Julia had given up a promising legal career to support Marcus in building his business empire. She raised their child, managed their home, and stood by him in every public appearance. But behind closed doors, Marcus wielded control over every aspect of her life, from the household finances to what she could say in front of his colleagues. The emotional abuse was subtle, buried under layers of charm and authority, but it was there. When Julia finally filed for divorce, she wasn't just trying to escape a toxic relationship, she was trying to reclaim her freedom. But what she didn't anticipate was how the legal system would seem stacked against her. Marcus had powerful attorneys and resources that Julia couldn't match. The prenuptial agreement, signed 2 decades earlier when Julia was young and in love, locked her out of almost everything. Despite the years she had dedicated to the marriage, the courtroom turned into a battlefield of paperwork, testimonies, and legal technicalities. Julia's attorney argued that the prenup had been signed under emotional pressure, that she was not given time to review it properly, and that it was fundamentally unfair given the massive inequality that now existed between the 2 parties. As journalists picked up the story, public interest exploded. Social media buzzed with opinions. Women's rights groups rallied behind Julia, pointing out how many similar cases had gone unnoticed simply because the law lacked nuance in addressing coercion and long-term sacrifice in a marriage. By the end of the first week of hearings, something rare happened. State legislators began attending the trial. It became clear that this wasn't just a divorce case anymore. It was a wake-up call. And what happened next would stun even the most seasoned legal experts. The courtroom was packed the next day. The air was electric, not just with legal tension, but with something more powerful: hope. Julia's testimony had touched a nerve. And now, her attorney, Lisa Moreno, was determined to shine a light on every shadow in Marcus's carefully constructed narrative. Lisa began laying out Julia's contributions to the marriage, proof of unpaid labor, sacrifice, and loyalty that had no price tag but undeniable value. Emails, calendar entries, testimonies from former employees and friends painted a vivid picture. While Marcus built his name, Julia built the foundation under him. Then came the part that made headlines. Julia had secretly recorded a conversation between herself and Marcus just months before filing for divorce. In the audio, Marcus can be heard dismissing her concerns, mocking her sacrifices, and saying, "You wouldn't have a penny without me." That one sentence broke the internet. Legal analysts debated its admissibility, but the emotional impact had already landed. This wasn't about bitterness. This was about imbalance, control, and a system that too often failed to account for those dynamics. Outside the courthouse, rallies began forming. Signs reading, "Unpaid labor is still labor," and "Fairness in family law" flooded the streets. The trial had become symbolic of something far larger than one couple's divorce. It had become a referendum on outdated spousal laws. Marcus's defense, however, was ruthless. His lawyers portrayed Julia as calculating, trying to leverage public sentiment to rewrite a contract she had willingly signed. They accused her of playing victim. But with every passing day, their argument felt more brittle, less human. Then, Lisa did something bold. She subpoenaed financial records that hadn't been disclosed previously, investments hidden behind shell companies, properties purchased under corporate aliases. What they revealed was shocking. Marcus had shielded assets for years, preparing for a potential split while ensuring Julia would walk away with nothing. The judge paused proceedings to allow forensic accountants to verify the findings. And when the numbers were confirmed, everything shifted. Suddenly, Julia wasn't just a woman asking for fairness. She was a victim of financial deceit. And the prenup, it now looked like a tool of entrapment, not protection. Meanwhile, national news picked up the trial as their top story. Politicians began weighing in. Talk shows debated whether prenuptial agreements needed tighter regulations. Even celebrities began speaking up, sharing stories of similar battles fought in silence. And through it all, Julia stood strong, not out of spite, but with purpose. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for every person whose value was measured in sacrifice, not salary. As the week ended, the judge announced he would allow the hidden financial document 3. With the hidden financial records now officially admitted into evidence, the courtroom transformed. The narrative had shifted. Marcus was no longer just a man defending his wealth. He was a man exposed for strategic concealment, someone who had used legal documents as weapons instead of safeguards. Julia sat quietly as the forensic accountant took the stand. Charts, spreadsheets, and timelines revealed the truth. Marcus had started siphoning funds into shell accounts years before filing for divorce. Properties across the country, undisclosed investments, even offshore holdings, all meticulously hidden. What shocked even the judge was the fact that Marcus had been advised on how to do this before the marriage even began. It wasn't just greed, it was premeditated. Public opinion exploded. Social media lit up with hashtags like #Justice for Julia and #Fix the Prenup. Morning news shows featured legal experts who had once dismissed Julia's claims but were now rethinking long-held assumptions. Back in the courtroom, Marcus's legal team attempted damage control. They argued that the prenup clearly outlined asset boundaries and that Marcus had every right to protect his investments. But Lisa countered with precision. This isn't about what he protected. It's about what he never disclosed. A contract based on lies is not a contract. It's a trap. Then came the emotional blow. Julia's daughter, now 19, testified. She spoke not only about the emotional distance she experienced growing up in that house, but also about the moments her mother sacrificed everything to ensure she felt loved, safe, and supported. "I never saw my mother get a paycheck," she said, her voice steady. "But I saw her work harder than anyone I know." The courtroom was silent again. Julia wiped tears from her eyes. Marcus couldn't meet his daughter's gaze. By this point, the case was no longer confined to legal frameworks. It had become about ethics, empathy, and what fairness should look like in modern relationships. Then, unexpectedly, the state's Attorney General issued a statement. The office would begin reviewing legislation surrounding prenuptial agreements, particularly those involving substantial power imbalances. The courtroom gasped as the bailiff read the announcement aloud. For the first time in decades, lawmakers were considering reform, not because of a think tank or an academic paper, but because one woman refused to be silent. Marcus's defense crumbled. The tone of their arguments shifted from aggression to negotiation. They began hinting at settlements, but Lisa and Julia refused. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about the message. When closing arguments began, Lisa looked the jury in the eyes. This isn't just Julia's fight. This is about how we protect people who love with their whole heart, who sacrifice and serve without a single expectation of return. If we don't protect them, what does that say about us? The jury left to deliberate, and Julia waited, with the calm resolve of someone who had already won, no matter the outcome. The final verdict would change her life. But the jury returned just after lunch. As the foreperson stood, Julia gripped the edge of the table. Marcus sat still, staring forward as if bracing for impact. We, the jury, find the prenuptial agreement invalid due to fraudulent non-disclosure and intentional financial concealment. A murmur spread through the courtroom. Julia closed her eyes, letting the weight of the words sink in. In addition, we rule in favor of an equitable division of all marital and non-marital assets uncovered during this trial. It wasn't just a legal win, it was a validation. For the years of silence, the nights of quiet suffering, and the battles she never asked for. Marcus lowered his head. The judge's final statement was even more powerful. This court recognizes that marriage is not merely a financial contract. It is a partnership, and that partnership must be built on truth. Anything less violates the foundation of our laws. The ruling sent shockwaves through the legal world. Headlines the next morning read, "Landmark divorce case, sparks reform talks, prenup loopholes exposed, change on the horizon. Julia's victory becomes national catalyst." Within weeks, advocacy groups began pushing state legislators to amend prenuptial laws. Legal panels were formed. A federal petition gained momentum, demanding mandatory financial transparency before signing marital contracts. Julia didn't retreat from the spotlight. Instead, she used it. She gave interviews, not for attention, but to educate. She spoke about the gaps in legal protection for stay-at-home spouses, the dangerous assumptions built into financial laws, and the importance of entering marriage with clarity, not fear. Meanwhile, Lisa was invited to chair a newly formed national committee on marital law reform. Her strategies during the trial became case studies in universities and law schools, and Julia's foundation expanded rapidly. It funded legal aid for low-income spouses and began working with financial educators to offer free workshops across the country. The initiative was called Truth Before Vows. Marcus, he quietly resigned from the board of his company. His name, once synonymous with financial genius, had become a cautionary tale. Investors distanced themselves and new leadership took over. As the months passed, Julia found peace, not in the court ruling or the press attention, but in knowing that her pain had purpose. Her daughter, now attending college, wrote her a letter. It read, "Mom, you didn't just fight for yourself. You fought for people you'll never even meet. I hope you know that makes you a hero." In the end, Julia's story became more than a courtroom drama. It became a movement, a shift in how we talk about love, power, and protection in relationships. And if you found her story as powerful as we did, make sure you subscribe to the Verdict Diaries for more inspiring, real-life courtroom tales. Every day we share stories that challenge norms, reveal truths, and empower people to take control of their narrative.